You see, something's going to happen.
What? What's going to happen?
Something wonderful.
What?
I understand how you feel. You see, it's all very clear to me now.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. Today we got a very special guest. We got Mariana Lewis joining us. I'm very excited to have her on to talk about tarot and psychology. But before we get to her, let's introduce the other rejects on the show. We got Judith back with us. Judith the Loon. What is going on, Judith? How are you?
Hi, it's Judith the Loon, and you can catch me on YouTube as the Loon and on Twitter as the Loon as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And we got Ethan Indigo. What is going on, sir? How are you?
Oh, great to see you guys. Awesome to be here. Looking forward to this. Always excited to learn more about tarot. And this book seems really interesting. Ethan Indigo Smith, easy to find on all the social media. I've written a few books and write several articles, not so infrequently. More to come pretty soon here. So, yeah, appreciate being here.
Well, the website highly appreciates your writing, so thank you very much, sir. If it wasn't for you, I don't think anybody would be adding it to it. I should be adding to it, and I'm not. So, but thank you very much, Ethan. Always great to have you on. And today, we're joined by Mariana Lewis, an archetypal Taoist and the co-host of Sora Mystica, the podcast where she and astrologer Christina unpacks symbolism, archetypes, dreams, and modern spirituality with equal parts scholarship and magic. Mariana is also the creator of an archetypal tarot approach that treats the cards as mirrors of the psyche, less fortune-telling, more soul work. She's also the author of Tarot and the Psychology of the Soul, exploring the archetypal mirrors of the psyche, which we will be talking about today. So, Mariana, if there's anything I left out or anything that you would like to advertise, the podcast and where they can find that, this and that, please let everybody know where they can find your amazing work.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I am on Instagram a lot as Persephone Sister, and then there's also Sora Mystica is the name of the podcast. You can find both of those things there. I'm also floating around on YouTube and Substack and all those all the places. But you can always find me as at Persephone Sister. That's my handle that I go by. But yeah, you got all the big things that I do.
Okay. All right. I didn't want to leave anything out,
Yeah.
But thank you very much for coming on. Very excited. I'm big into tarot. I think it's awesome that you look at it from another angle. But again, same question I give everybody who comes on the show about the occult. I guess, what was it like? When did you realize this was for you? How did you end up even getting into this, if you don't mind?
I actually started in my very early 20s. I found a book in my grandfather's attic called The Undiscovered Self by Carl Jung. Oh. And I found that and I started reading that, and then that was it. And I was obsessed with Jung, and I read everything that I could find by Jung. And I was an actor actually in New York doing the actor life. And then one day I was like, I can't do this anymore. I gave it up. I went back to school and I got my master's degree in Western intellectual traditions, focusing in occult philosophy. So the tarot was like something I picked up along the way. Someone gave me a tarot reading one time and I was like, this is amazing. This is a thing that I have to keep studying. And the Jungian psychology plus the occult philosophy, and the archetypal theory, it just all kind of coalesced into this approach. And then it became this career that I have, which I'm very blessed to have. It just unfolded in this extraordinary way. So it was just kind of kismet, all just because I found a book in the attic and was like, I don't know, let's try this. It looks interesting.
I like how it was Carl Jung and not something like overtly blatant like a cult. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't like, oh, I came across Crowley or Golden Dawn book, Israel Regardie book, or Manly P. Hall. It's pretty cool that it came from that way. So it was probably, that was a rabbit hole in itself getting into his shit, right?
Yeah. It went like full psychology and it was like, oh, he's into some weird stuff. And then that went there. It was very interesting. Yeah.
Awesome. Did anybody want to say anything or ask anything before I keep going? Just don't want to.
I was just going to joke that Jung hits like that. You get a hold of a Jung book and then your whole life path is oriented in a different way.
Yeah, and then you're like, oh no, everything has to change. I can't do what I was doing before. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also know like I just wanted to know, like, kind of I guess, what would you consider yourself? Are you like a ceremonial magician? Like, do you do ritual work, or is it not to that extent?
Yeah, I don't really go that deep into that kind of practice. My wheelhouse is really tarot. Once I like narrowed myself on tarot, that's kind of where I stuck. I do some altar work and like kind of contemporary witchcraft light, like I don't really have a set practice that I work with, but really tarot is kind of where I live.
Nice. What drew you to tarot? Like, what was it about that? Was it originally divination, or did you think it went well with psychology?
I did a little bit of the I Ching first because Jung talks about it so much that I, dabbled in that and was seeing what that was about. So I was a little bit familiar with divination, but it's the symbolism of the tarot. Like, it's the fact that you have these 78 cards and that's the card, and they don't change for the most part. I mean, like today people change them all the time, but in the traditional system, like that's what you have. And they are these really weird kind of collection of like choices for what these cards are. We have the Hermit and we have the Moon, and some of them like fit the Christian context that the tarot was made in the 15th century, but then some of them don't. Like we have the Lovers, which is Adam and Eve, but also something very sexual about it. And then we have the Devil, of course, but then we have the Hanged Man. What's that about? And so it was just a fascinating kind of array of symbols that I needed to like crack the code. I need to figure out what it was all about. And so that's what I've been doing ever since I got my first reading. Like the High Priestess card is one of the most fascinating cards because in 1450, what were they doing with the High Priestess? Or back then she was called the Popess. Why did they have that card? And so this has been my fascination.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I like that.
How did you utilize the lessons or facets of divination through the I Ching in your tarot practice, or has that like complemented? Or
I think that something that's been really interesting and working a little bit with the I Ching and then working with the tarot was seeing the different types of divination out there, and you really have to work with them in different ways. So Marie-Louise von Franz, who's a like well-known Jungian, she has a book on synchronicity and divination, and she says that there's really two kinds of divination. There's binary divination and there's chaos divination. If you're working with binary divination, there's generally going to be it's like a coin flip. You're going to do the thing and you're going to get a response. So I Ching kind of works in that way, where you throw the coins or you throw the yarrow stalks and this is your hexagram. And so this is what message you're getting. Whereas the tarot, you do pull the cards, but then you have this chaotic interpretation ahead of you. There is no, this card means this, and this card means this, and this card means this. It's like reading tea leaves kind of, where you're pulling out the interpretation based on your particular skill set. And yes, there's like practices and established things that you're pulling from, but it's pure chaos. And so they're very different systems. So when I'm working with tarot, that's kind of my go-to, is like being in that chaotic divination. I feel a little bit more comfortable, I guess. There's more room to see what comes up from the unconscious and what kinds of things appear and way the intuitive psyche is activated. That's what really fascinates me.
It's a super interesting contrast to the binary and the chaos. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I like that. At first, when you said that, I was like, but it totally makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't come up with it. When I was reading that, I was like, oh my God, yeah, that's that. And so I get like so many students who are like, they're frustrated. They pull cards and they're like, well, what does it mean? And I'm like, I don't know. No, I mean, it's not binary divination. You're not going to get this card means that and that card means that. So here's your answer. It's chaotic. You have to sort through the symbols and kind of pull up that divinatory gift yourself. That's like the task of the chaotic divination practice. So it takes practice. It takes work. It takes trusting your kind of intuitive insights, all that stuff.
Judith, do you have anything before I go forward?
I do, but I think you sort of answered it because you said you've dealt with witchcraft before,
Yeah.
correct? And I did dabble in that a little bit. And I was told by a few high priestesses with the major arcanas when it comes to the tarots, if you lay them out, it's like a path working that you could go through. So I was wondering if, with the psychology that you're putting behind it, would you recommend that as a path working over, let's say, the Kabbalah or anything else, other systems, planetary or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because like they really kind of are similar in that, you know, Kabbalah gives you the tree, right, that you're climbing, or you're going up or you're going down, whichever path you're taking. And with the planets too, you're kind of working with the different energies and how they're moving in your chart. And so the way that I see the tarot is exactly that. The major arcana, this is the great secret of the tarot, the great mystery of it, is that those 22 cards. So for those who don't know, the tarot is broken into two different types of cards, the minor arcana and the major arcana. The minor arcana is just your playing deck that you have. You have the Ace of Cups, you have the Knight of Wands, etc. But then the major arcana are these like face cards, these call them trump cards as well, that have each have their own name. And they're in this particular sequence, and that sequence doesn't change. And that sequence holds the secret of this spiritual pathway that we're all on. So bringing in Jungian psychology, this is what I talk a lot about in the book, is we have the path of individuation laid out. Like, this is the psycho-spiritual path that we're all on. So when you pull this card, you're kind of clued into, this is the stage I'm at in this process. And of course, it's not linear. It's spiralitic, it's cyclical. So we're always going back and forth in the path. So we can pull a card that's ahead and then a card that's behind, and it doesn't, showing us kind of like how this movement is happening. So it is like this very kind of spiritual tool when you use it that way, and psychological tool, because when you're thinking about individuation, the way that Jung talked about it, really talked about it in two ways. Talked about it practically as like, we have to separate from the mass and individuate and become our authentic self and say, who am I, right? And it's not just what society has told me I am or my parents have told me I am. And we also have to do this mystical individuation, which is trying to reunite with that archetype of the self, which is the singular self, but also the cosmic self, the greater self, the all, right? So these are both the tasks of the individuation process. So that's what the tarot is showing us, like what that process is. And where are we at any point gives us information about what we need to learn. How do we need to grow in that moment?
Thank you.
Fascinating.
Okay, so I do have a follow-up on that one, because when you're reading tarot, people usually say you're supposed to read for someone else. Technically, you're not supposed to read yourself. But your take on it is technically you're supposed to be using it to help you with your path, because that's the only way, and this is just an assumption, that the psychology that you're talking about would actually apply to it.
Yeah, so that's one of the big, I think, misconceptions that people have about tarot. You know, there's a lot of like rules that we hear about it. And one of the things is like, you're only supposed to read for other people. Also, like, you're not supposed to buy your own deck. Like, there's all these things, you know, it's someone made that up at some point, and who knows where that came from.
Somebody who didn't have the money to buy their own said that.
Yeah. It's kind of like being initiated into like, you know, a secret society or something. You can't just walk and be like, hi, I'm here, I'm ready. Like, you have to be in. Like this, I think that's the idea. But today we don't really follow those rules, and these like old like kind of wives' tales that we've pulled through. So when I read professionally, so I read for other people all the time. That's my work. So when I'm reading, I'm applying what the person is telling me about themselves, and my particular knowledge, and like we're in conversation to figure out what these cards are saying to them and how they're laying out this story. But if I'm pulling for myself, I'm doing the same thing. It's harder to read for yourself because you don't have any objectivity. So you can't like be a little bit on the outside and be like, maybe we need to challenge what the ego wants this to be and shift it. Like be a little bit more curious. So a lot of people find it easier to read for others or to have cards read for them rather than reading for yourself. But you absolutely can read for yourself, and it can be a very, very enriching tool. And it doesn't, I like always say, like, please don't do this every single day of your life. You pull cards every single day of your life, you're going to be bombarded with all these things and you're going to try to like make sense of everything. I think it should be used more ritually, like more in a kind of sacred practice, and something like you're engaging with this and saying, I need to reflect on where I am right now, or I need to understand this point of tension in my life. And I need to kind of lay out the symbols and see what comes through.
I like that. I actually do. I mean, I do think, obviously you could read people cards, but I do think, just for me, I've always thought that the tarot was more of like kind of benefited somebody learning them themselves. Kind of in the sense that you look at it, more of like psychological aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's very dangerous territory when you use the tarot in like traditional divination, the way that it might have been used in the 19th century. Like the history of the tarot was not originally a divination tool. Originally, it was just a playing card. It was like bridge. It was just a playing card game that the very, very rich nobility would play. And they would have these decks commissioned to show off how rich they were and this whole thing. And then it became popular and kind of fell out of fashion as a game, and just it was picked up as this form of divination, and kind of later in the late 18th century through the 19th century. And then it was in the 20th century that Crowley and Arthur Waite kind of were like, wait a second. I mean, there were guys before them too, but they were like, there's something really mystical in this. And since then, I mean, it's still been used as divination throughout the 20th century, but I would say in the last like 30, 40 years, it's much, much more common to use it as a psychological tool than it is as a divinatory tool. So when you're using it pure divination, like when am I going to meet my soulmate kind of thing, there are people out there really good at that, and they can be like, oh, you got the Knight of Cups really soon, and they read it that way. But it's not so popular anymore to do that. A lot of people, they use it to say, like, what's going on? Why am I stuck here? Why do I not understand this problem in my life? And that's really where I find it to be most useful, because if you read it in that strict divination that's like trying to tell the future, like it can be really confusing, because again, it's chaotic. So you're like, wait, is this a good thing or a bad thing? I got the 10 of Swords, which is this card with a guy with knives in his back. Am I gonna, like, is the worst thing ever gonna happen to me? Or is this me being like, I should just pay better attention to what's behind me? We don't really know always how to interpret it. Unless you're like a super expert, like master at the tarot, I don't recommend reading it like for prediction, because it can be scary. It can be really overwhelming.
Well, I really like that you add the idea of individuation into the cards as you're talking about, because it kind of, instead of just purely divination, I'm at the whim of destiny, it's like, oh, I can work on this and be focused on that, like you're saying. As soon as you bring that into the discussion, you almost give some self-responsibility and hope to do something different.
Yeah, you don't lose autonomy, which I think is like the scary thing in working with any kind of divination, is that once you know the future, you're trapped in the future. It's like Oedipus 101, right? Like you're given the prophecy, and now the prophecy is going to happen, whether you want it to or not. You're going to do everything you can to avoid the prophecy, and you're going to walk right into it. So I always think it's kind of a dangerous thing to toy with knowing the future or trying to predict the future, because then you feel trapped in it. And the thing that is actually useful is to say, well, how does this give me back my autonomy in my life, to say, like, I have to choose how to live. I really think this is something I talk about a little bit in my book, is that people gravitate towards the tarot because life is overwhelming and they want to be told what to do and how to live it, so that they don't have that burden of like, what if I mess it up? What if I do the wrong thing? So the cards will tell me, and then it'll be right. And the real way that the tarot is beneficial is that it helps us understand how we want to live. Like, what's the right way for us to live? Who are we really? What is it that we desire in life? What point are we in life? Where are we blind to our own issues, right? These kinds of things, so that we make our choices in life and feel strong in them and feel clear about them. That's really what it's good at. when we can actually use it that way.
Yeah, in the past, when I used to do a lot of ritual work, there was times when I'd be like, I guess it was more theurgy, or I was working on myself, not really like trying to cast spells out into the public.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of times where it's, I was like literally trying to work on stuff that I wanted to change about myself that I thought was an issue. And sometimes like I would try to attribute that to like the Kabbalistic tree of life. And I would sometimes, like if I'm kind of finding a sphere that I think like might help deal with the issue, sometimes I would take the cards that are on the paths, the major arcana, the ones that were like going towards that sphere or leaving it. And sometimes I would incorporate them on my altar, and I would try to like meditate on them and see if something came out to me as well. Yeah, that's like really engaging that kind of archetypal level of what the cards present. Because we think of like how Jung described archetypes. They're like the inner gods of the psyche, right? So we can kind of pull them out almost like deities. And I recommend this all the time with clients when a certain card comes up and it's really loud, and like, take that out of your deck, put that on your altar. You're working with that energy almost like a deity now. And so that's the task for you. Because a lot of the cards, we have Justice and the Hermit and the Hangman. They are personified figures of these archetypal energies. So it can be really, really awesome to work with it that way. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Plus, I think, there was also times, so many times, and I'm sure Judith heard it herself at the OTO, so many times they would always suggest meditate on the cards, too, if you don't understand them. Just sit there and meditate on them. So I would do that a lot myself. I don't think it got too far, but, I tried. I'm not good with tarot unless I attribute it to the Kabbalistic tree of life. For some reason,
there's so many layers that are overlap between them, so it's a great pathway in. I recommend that all the time. I usually kind of present it as like Jungian active imagination. So it's a form of meditation that's kind of like lucid dreaming. And so I recommend that a lot to my students and clients, to like pull in the image of the card and let this like lucid dream sort of unfold in waking time. And that always like presents something wild. It's very cool. So I give that assignment a lot.
Nice. Go ahead, Judith. Go ahead.
I'm curious. Since you use Jung, the psychology part with the tarot within your clients, some of these cards are very heavy.
Yeah.
Depending on where people are in life. And when they hit that stone, what is your suggestion? Do you actually suggest that they go get therapy by a psychologist? Okay.
Well, yeah. I mean, it depends on the things that are coming up and what's going on for them. But always, like I teach students who are trying to become tarot readers themselves in this kind of archetypal methodology. Right. And one of the first things is like, if someone is overwhelmed, have a referral ready to go, because this is heavy duty psychological stuff. But I will say that 80% of my clients are either in therapy or therapists themselves.
Oh, wow.
So
therapists themselves. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that a lot of them are kind of already in that headspace of like, I'm working and I want to like a really concentrated way to dig in deeper with like where I am right now. Yeah. I've also had a bunch of clients who are not in good space. And they are like, that borderline between like, I'm in this spiritual thing and I'm crossing over into delusion. And like that kind of the inner things are becoming real things on the outside. I've gotten some of those clients too. And then first thing I do is like, probably you need some kind of external help and grounding, because this is like Jung talked about this himself, how he thought he went into a psychosis when he was really getting into building his psychology, because he kept having these visions and like these inner archetypes were just kind of manifesting in these like waking dreams. And he thought he was going nuts. And then he wrote it all down and it became his red book, which is now like one of the best things we have from his psychology, because it's personal rather than it being like just scientific. And that's where a lot of his psychology came from. So it's like, we go into these states sometimes where the inner becomes outer and we lose a little bit of touch with reality, but we need something to ground us. We need someone to be paying attention to us in that passage. So I always recommend that.
I wonder to that, what practices might you recommend, and maybe to your personal kind of practice, what do you do to cool down? Or I don't want to term it in things that are not appropriate, but I term it cool down to kind of get into a divinatory state before you might do a reading.
My opinion, honestly, is that if you're already in a place where you feel like you're a little bit out of touch with reality or things are very overwhelming, don't engage with it. Like, we don't want to, like, stoke the beast. I think that it's the thing you always want to, like, look at first, in my opinion, is what your dreams are presenting, or what you are coming up with yourself. You don't need to add more symbols and images to that to make, like, I had a client one time who was really kind of like in this state where there was a lot of like weird images coming to this person. They were having waking visions a lot. And then I pulled a certain card from them, and then they were emailing me for months about how this card was now like following them. And they would look around the corner and they would see this like as a real person. And I was like, whoa, we don't need more of these images. Like, you can just work with what is presented to you by your own unconscious, and be in a therapeutic setting where you have somebody to help you make sense of it. I honestly think that whenever we're engaging with this, when it starts to feel overwhelming and we lose touch with the reality a little bit, we should pull back, unless you're in a contained space. Like if you're working with a therapist or an analyst or something like that, then they'll guide you through it. But it's happened to me where I've worked too much with the tarot, and then I'm like overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed by material, and I'm like, I don't even know what to do with all of this. So put it away. You don't have to get every reading or figure out every card. Most of these things will be working on you unconsciously anyway. They will be pulling out things from your own psyche. So I know that's not always what people want to hear. People want to go farther into it, and they're like, stuff's happening. Let's go, let's dig. And I'm kind of like, it can be dangerous to lose touch with reality like that without kind of having that grounding somewhere. It could be scary. Yeah.
Did any of you have any other questions? I did want to teeter off to a different subject. All right. I just wanted to ask, if you don't mind, a little bit about the podcast as well. Because I want to help you promote that as well. Because when I was looking at it, definitely looks like a lot of stuff I'd cover, I'd be interested in. Yeah. How did that begin? How did that start? Like, what came? Like, how did that come up?
Yeah. So my friend Christina Farella, she's the co-host on that. She's an astrologer. She works she's not like a Jungian, like kind of oriented person like I am necessarily, but she works in the same sort of way with like archetypes and looking at things more psychologically. And we've been like best friends, really good friends for years. And I was just always like, we talk about this on the phone. Like, these are our
just hit record now.
Why don't we just record it and put it out there? So she was really busy for a while, so it took some time to convince her, and then we started it a few years ago at this point. And we've kind of slowed down in the last few months because she had a baby recently, so we're taking a little break as she's adjusting. But we're gonna hopefully come back full throttle in the next few months. So yeah.
Very nice. And for the listeners, like, what's the type of stuff that you cover on there, just to get people an idea?
Yeah, so we talk about basically the symbols of life. It's sort of, we look at really like individual symbols. So we have an episode on the moon, the maiden. We talk a little bit about witchcraft and ritual. We talk about Jung and individuation. We have an episode, one of the episodes I've wanted to do forever is the unicorn. So maybe we'll do that sometime soon, because like that's what is that about? Like, what's that symbol about? So basically we take these symbols that are in our zeitgeist, that are in the collective consciousness, and we try to dig in to get to what does it actually mean? What history is there about it? Where does it appear in myth and all these kinds of things, so that we sort of pull the layers apart and see what it means for us now.
Nice, awesome. Yeah, I would highly suggest people who listen to this show to go check out that show. I was looking at
Thanks.
Again, the shows are totally topics that I've either covered or would like to. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then at the end, we will have listeners send in a dream. And we'll try to pull apart some of the symbols of their dreams to like see how these things like kind of reflect in our actual psyches. So that's one of my favorite parts of the show.
That's interesting. That's funny. There's one day a week where me and a co-host, we cover a symbol or a sigil or some type of thing. We cover one each, and then we read mail of people's dreams or like just weird experiences.
Yeah, it's very cool. And people send us wild dreams. So
oh yeah.
Get to hear crazy dreams. It's just fun.
Yep. Nice. So all right. So now, like, I guess, I mean, I know we've kind of been probably talking about stuff that would be in that book, but what was it that made you decide one day, yeah, I'm going to write a book?
So yeah, I actually have the Archetypal Tarot School is this program I've been teaching for, I don't know, three or 4 years at this point. I started that as I was like building out this approach to the tarot. Like this was just something in my head and my approach and how I was working with clients. And at some point I was like, I should just like write all this down and like put out this system. And when I wrote it out for myself, I was like, oh my gosh, this is an actual system of like working with the cards. And I had a lot of students at that time I was teaching about just general information about the tarot. And so I put it into a long form class, a 10-week class. And it was very successful and has continued to be like a really popular offering. And so I got, a lot of people every year asking me, I don't only teach it once a year. So people are always like, when's the next one coming out? And I realized that there's a lot of interest in this. So I kind of just took all of that material and reformatted it and put some new things in and all that stuff and made it into a book. So, it just kind of, I was working on it without realizing I was working on it for a very long time.
That's great how it worked out like that.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions?
I do have one.
No, please.
Sorry. You said you have a lot of students. Are those students like new, or do you have like, old school people, occultists, high priestesses, people who have been in traditions? How accepting are they of this approach?
Yeah. I have a really interesting like selection of people. I have some people who are like brand new to the tarot and they're just like, what is this about? Like, just tell me information about it. And then I have other people who will reach out and they'll be like, I've been, a witch for 40 years and I want to learn like a whole new approach to this that I haven't like understood before, or haven't thought of before. So I kind of get this mixture of people who are very new to it and just like want to work with it in this personal way, in this way for inner, development. And then people who have been doing this a very long time who are just like, there's more information out there. What else can I learn? What other approaches can I take? So I kind of get both. I think that most of my students are people who are just trying to live their best life and want a good tool to work with. And so they kind of find me, and that's, like my website's like, hi, this is what I do. And they're like, oh yeah, that's what I want to learn. So it works.
Could you share an example of how you might include like lessons pertaining to the psyche or individuation in a reading?
Yeah.
If that's too broad of a question.
No, it's good. So think of a card that would be like a really good example. So the Chariot, for example, this is a card that the basic image of the card is a guy, he's in a chariot, and he has this canopy of stars over his head. This is based on the Rider-Waite Tarot, which is created by Arthur Waite and Pamela Smith. That's the system that I use. There's a couple other ones. Crowley has one, and then there's the Marseille, which is the older one. So in that one, he's there, and he has a black and white sphinx that are guiding him, and traditionally this card is about like movement forward in life. Like you'll have an idea or have some kind of inspiration, and it's like, this is going to be successful, move forward with it. And that's like the traditional way of reading the card. When I'm reading it, I see it as this archetype of the ego in motion, right? So we think about the ego as a Jungian archetype, but we're talking about the sense of I that is distinct from that capital S self, which is like the big I, and the ego is like the small I, the personal I. And so the Chariot really initiates this individuation phase of strengthening that ego, which Jung says has to be strong in order to do the later work of facing our shadow and our unconscious and the dark forces within us. And so we have to have that strong ego. He calls it like, I don't remember where the quote is from, but he's like, it's this little candle flame against the entirety of the night, right? So we have to have this strong candle in order to like get any light as we're pushing through that later phase. So we have to develop the ego. And so the chariot initiates that. So when I'm in a reading with someone, you know, I'm usually not going to say, oh yeah, this is going to be a successful project, go for it, or whatever. Usually I'm saying, well, what is the ego in pursuit of? What is the motion that the ego is moving toward? And then I often will bring in the idea of libido energy that Jung talked about, which is different from like Freudian libido, which is sexual. Jungian libido is just pure life force energy. It's like just this psychic energy. One of the things that Jung says about it is that the unconscious, the inner psyche, like has a gradient. There's this natural flow that the psyche is trying to like pull that libido energy toward. And that's what the chariot is moving toward. Because one of the secrets of the card, if you pay close attention, is that the charioteer doesn't have any reins. The chariot is moving on its own. He's just going with it. And so here's the ego self saying, I'm trying to move my life forward. But the secret is that life is moving toward the thing that the unconscious already is directing it toward. And so that's something we very often talk about when I pull that card. Where does that libido energy, where is that gradient pulling you versus where does the ego want to go? How can we develop that balance between those two things? So that's an example of how I might take that deeper in like an archetypal psychological way, rather than just staying on that surface level of, here's this guy in a chariot and we're going forward somewhere. Like a lot of times I'll ask people about their dreams and see if they have dreams of cars and planes and vehicles flying off somewhere. That happens a lot when I'm talking about that card. People will be like, yeah, I just had a dream that my car stalled out. I'm like, okay, well, we're not on the libido path. Let's see if we can find where the gradient is and redirect ourselves. So it's wild how often that happens, where the tarot is like, the symbols that I see in the tarot come up in the same ones that people are dreaming about. It's I don't know, it's wild, but very cool.
Super cool. I mean, it's like, I feel like the cards are just representing the power of the mind at the time, right? Yeah. So the dreams correspondence, it makes sense in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a dream years ago. I saw the day before I got a reading, because I also prefer to get readings from other people for me. I don't like to do it myself. So I was about to get a reading from someone, and the night before I had a dream that I had two dreams actually. The first one was that I was in a forest by myself and there was no work to do. And I was like, I have nothing to do. And I didn't know what to do with myself. And I was really like, what do I do here? And then right after that, I dreamed that I was in a hotel in Paris and it was nighttime. And I looked out the window and like the Eiffel Tower was like sparkling and it was so peaceful and it was just so nice. And I was like, this is lovely. And I'm here by myself. And I woke up from these dreams and like, this is not my normal dream. I'm usually dreaming of chaos. And I'm like, what time is it? I missed my appointment, the things that we always dream about. And then the next day in that reading, I pulled, someone pulled the Hermit for me, also with the Page of Wands. And the Page of Wands is a card of like, let's go. What's next? What am I orienting myself towards? Like, let's have the passion and the energy moving. And the Hermit is isolation, solitude, going into the inner forest. And it was so obvious that like in the dreams, I was in that isolation, in that inner forest, in that quiet. And yet there was this part of me that was like, aren't I supposed to be doing something? Why is there nothing to do? And the cards were the same cards, same dreams. And I did not like that at all because I didn't want the Hermit. I wanted to do stuff. I was like, I have stuff to do. I don't like this. But that's what the cards do for us all the time, is they say, this is the thing you don't want because this is the thing you most need probably. And so listen to that now and see if you can make an adjustment.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have that individuation processed and it's like, oh no, well, okay, I guess I have to.
Yeah, that's the task. And it's always, as I said, with those 22 cards moving always in this spiral, we keep coming back to it. And the task is like, next time I come back to it, have I learned a little bit more about it? And now can I go a little bit more willingly, or can I bring out another layer of what this archetype has for me, or what this lesson is in life? So that's the greater goal there too.
Makes sense.
One question I did want to ask, but I feel like you probably already answered it. Unless there's other books out there, but like, I guess what problem did you want this book to like solve? But like, what's different about this that you thought of over the tarot books? Like, how did you see this as being different than what's out there? Was it just the psychology aspect, or?
Yeah, so it's a lot about that. I'm certainly not the first person to write about how the tarot talks about inner reflection, right? People talk about that all the time. I bring in this Jungian lens. So I have this particular framework and this language that I teach and that I'm comfortable in. And there's a couple books out there on Jungian psychology or, archetypal psychology and the tarot, but they're more just guidebooks. They're just kind of like, here's what the cards mean with this spin on it. And my book does have that. It does like tell you, here's how to interpret the cards, because it's a tarot book, so you want that information. But the bigger part of it is really like, what's the work if we're using the tarot this way? What do we do? What does the arc of individuation here mean for me? And if I'm actually pulling cards, how do I try to interpret these cards? How do I work in this methodology? So I was very much looking for that book when I was learning the tarot, because that's what interests me and that's my particular expertise. So I never found it in a way that was like satisfying. It was all either very, very, very densely Jungian and hard to get through for, people who are not like hardcore Jungian thinkers, or it was just like, here's a way to interpret the cards, and it didn't really go any deeper. So it's kind of, I'm trying to find that middle point.
One thing I did want to ask also, I guess, how would you define, I mean, this is another thing too, I feel like shadow work has gotten very trendy on social media, or the phrase being thrown around, I think. What to you do you think is, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think shadow work is one of those hot topics that everyone gets excited about, but it kind of doesn't mean anything. Like it kind of at this point has gotten so diluted that we don't really know what we mean when we're talking about it. A lot of times we think of it as like facing our bad side, which very much the shadow is about. But the shadow as an archetype, as an idea, is actually Jungian. Jung is the one who kind of coined the term and came up with that way of thinking. And basically, he says the shadow is everything that we don't see about ourselves, that the ego cannot see. So it's anything that is repressed, hidden, obscured in whatever way, and that is equally the best stuff in our psyches. So many times I will pull cards for clients and they'll be very smart or very ambitious, but they're constantly like, I don't know if I can, I don't know if I should, I'm so bad at this. And you'll see that they're pushing down their best qualities as well. So that's also in the shadow. So when we're working with shadow, we are trying to engage with what we literally cannot see about ourselves, which is very, very hard and very dangerous. There's oftentimes a reason why it's in the shadow, because to bring that in could disrupt what we understand about ourselves. To think that all our lives we are a really passionate person with, a lot of energy to pursue our dreams in life, and then we realize we're actually lazy as hell. That's very hard to face, and it cracks our whole sense of self. And so we're going to push that away because the ego's natural instinct is to preserve itself and to still live life and not crumble. So it's dangerous work when we're doing it sincerely and well. That doesn't mean we can't do it. We should do it. But we need to be aware that my opinion is that the shadow is ready to be worked with when it starts presenting itself to you. When, for example, you have that one friend who you think is a complete jerk and they keep like being in your circle and you keep getting pissed off by them and you're like, why can't I get over this? The shadow is right there, right? There's something about them that is triggering something in you, and there's an opportunity for a conversation. But if you're just walking around in the dark probing at like, where am I a bad person? This is dangerous territory, in my opinion. So I have in the book, I actually have a whole chapter on like techniques of working with the tarot. And a lot of it is about shadow work and doing this very careful and thoughtful process of using the cards to help guide this work and really check in with what's coming up in the psyche. I've thought a lot. I actually am right now there's a online like institution called the Jung Academy. And so they teach about Jungian topics. And so I'm on their faculty. And so right now I'm actually teaching on shadow and tarot. So I'm thinking about this a lot currently. But it has to be something that's already presented to you, or that the card is presenting to you and you already have a little bit of a sense of what that looks like. So I'll give an example. There was a couple years ago, I did a reading for myself, and there was like something I wanted to happen. I was like waiting for this thing to happen and come through. And I pulled the 8 of Wands inverted. And that card is like, it's just like wands flying. The idea is that energy is moving, things are happening, things are coming through. So usually when you pull that right side up, it's like, good, it's going to happen fast. Like everything's moving. When it comes up inverted or upside down, a very classic way of thinking about it is like things are delayed. The energy's not going anywhere. Things are stalled out. And so I saw that and I was really pissed off because it's not what I wanted. I wanted to say, it's time. Why isn't this happening yet? And it just agitated me. And I realized, okay, this is a shadow thing. There's something really, really upsetting. Not just that I'm not getting what I want. Yeah, that sucks. But there's something more. It's something really pissing me off about this card. So I worked with the shadow work process that I kind of outline in the book. And the more that I interrogated it and questioned it and thought about it, the more I realized like, there's a belief in my psyche that the universe does not conspire to help me, but to thwart me, but to make everything harder. Like there's this external force that I believe is trying to like sabotage me. And this is a deep shadow like belief that I had held that I didn't realize was there. And so seeing the thing not come through and seeing the card that said, oh yeah, it's not going to come through, not right now, I was like, yeah, because the universe hates my guts. Of course it does. And I'm always fighting against this and I don't understand why. And so I had to like really sit with that. Like, where did that come from? What happened that inspired this belief? And how is that continuing to sabotage me in my life?
Oh, yeah.
And like all of those big questions that were really hard to look at. And it was a breakthrough, slowly over the next couple months as the more I sat with that, because assuming that the world is against me meant that disappointment was there all the time, right? I could never just like take a loss and be like, oh, okay, next one. Like, no, there it is again, like this belief I have. And so that was very much locked in my shadow, that thing. So that's the kind of stuff that we have. And it was locked away for a reason, right? Because if I had total consciousness over that, then I would be depressed and I would be like not able to get anything done because I would always believe like nothing's good's going to happen anyway. So it was pushed down, right? But it was still there. And so that's the idea with shadow, is that even though it's pushed away, it's still active. And so we're trying to bring these things up slowly and gently, but it does take time and it requires a lot of intentionality.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there was like even for myself when I started getting big into like I guess looking at myself in that way. I mean, I even took it back to like as a child where it's like, my neighbor might have said something that for some reason made me decide that that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Or like my father might have said something to me or overheard a conversation and I just took that as that's how you're supposed to act and think. I look at it now, it's like, do I really agree with that shit?
Mm-hmm.
Or behaviors that I've realized that I've done myself, that it's like, this is how I deal with certain things and it's not right. It's really that you've been doing for your whole life.
Yeah.
So it could get really serious.
Yeah. There's a poet named Robert Bly who talks about the shadow in this way. And he calls it the long bag that we're always dragging behind us. So we're dragging this bag, and then as we're going, someone says something awful to us. We're like, stuff that in there. My mom told me I'm ugly. Stuff that in there. We keep just dragging it behind us, and we don't realize that this bag is always attached to our ankle and it's always weighing us down. And so that's one of the reasons why the tarot is such an amazing tool, because it gives us a way of looking at it. It gives us a symbol. It gives us a scene or a figure. And it's like, that is an expression of this thing that I've been carrying with me forever. And what from the card can inspire how I understand it better, and then try to heal that or change that or face it, or whatever stage we're at.
You know, a lot of times when I used to, with shadow work, I was kind of like looking at certain stuff where it was like, I guess maybe almost like a phone in a sense. You'll have all these apps, but then there's this major, like the whole operating system that's been there from the beginning that got programmed that lets all that other stuff run. I mean, that's why I would even go back to a child, because at that point you really don't know how things are, and you're just basically like a sponge, and you're kind of being programmed by who's ever around you telling you how things are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was very like programmable. I was looking at it. I mean, I don't know if that's like maybe not the best way to look at it either, but yeah, I did kind of see it like that. Like, shit, like I really got to take it back that far. And I don't know what it was, something in the Gita. I think when I was reading the Gita, for some reason when I took it, I looked at it a different way than most people probably do. But I felt like when he was there and he had those two sides, I was like, I feel like that's like his conscious or his brain or like something arguing back and forth with himself. Like for some reason I took it that way, and I don't know, that really started making me try to like, because he mentioned like, I think his neighbor, his parents, or his school, something like that. And I started thinking like, fuck, that's where I've gotten all my ideas about the rest of my life. It's from those people and the things that they said, or conversations, or don't do this because X, Y, and Z. Why? Because I said so. Well, that really doesn't give me an answer either. But, I listened to it.
Right. That's like Jung's idea of individuation, basically, is that we are raised by our parents, by society, by everything around us. And then at some point, the process starts where we go, and now I got to unroll all of that and figure out who I am actually.
Whew, it's scary.
And that's the process. That's in the tarot. The card for that is the Fool. So the Fool has like this he has the stick with the bag attached to it, right? And he's about to walk off a cliff. And so the idea is that we finally get to the point where we have unrolled the bag, right? The long bag that we drag behind us. And what we carry is almost nothing. We carry almost nothing with us. We're totally free. And we say, I'm fresh, I'm starting new, and about to step off the cliff, because to everyone else in the world, this looks like, what are you doing? This is death. This is not how the world works. This is not who you're supposed to be. But we're the only ones who see that there's a path that's invisible to everybody else. And we're going to walk right into it. And so that card shows that individuation like moment where we're like, oh, this is my life. And I'm someone entirely different from what everybody's told me I'm supposed to be and what I am.
As you talk, the distinction on your presentation of tarot, it makes me think of the Buddhist idea of the elephant as mind. And, it's almost like when the main lesson that they present is when you aren't in control of your mind, the elephant can do horrible things. And when you are, of course, the mind is powerful. But it also reminds me of the contrast of just being at the whim of this destiny and or controlling this powerful mind, elephant. Yeah. I think that's very much, like one of the things that Jung says about what we're trying to do as humans, and like what the individuation process is about, is to be the same person in all the conditions of our life. Right. And so every time we're given a new situation or told something else by someone else, we're trying to adapt. And when we're, in that authentic selfhood, when we're in that individuated state, which of course is like the lifetime journey, we never really fully get there. Then we are who we are always. And there's that center point that is unchanging, that has that kind of that grounding, that all these different forces will come in, all the thoughts will come in, the fears will come in, all this stuff, but we remain centered, we remain that unchanging self. That's the goal that we're trying to get at. And it's a really beautiful thing to remember is the point. And one of the great things about tarot is that tarot is all about questions. We're always asking a question. We're always like, why is this happening? Why am I doing that? Why is this not happening?
does he love me? Like we're always asking the questions. And one of the things I say all the time about the tarot is that there's no such thing as an answer, first of all, because there never really is an answer to anything. But the real point of a reading is to find the better question. What was the question we didn't know we were asking? So if we come saying like, why can't I just get over this? And we pull some cards, hopefully those cards will get us to realize that maybe the better question was, why can't I just live the way I want to? Why can't I just move on now? Like, why am I stuck here? And so that's the better question. And so that question will get us closer to that centered experience of who we are, which will then hopefully the next time something happens, like what initially inspired the question, we are not as, like thrown around and lose our center because of it. That's the goal eventually.
I like that a lot. That was really good. Judith, did you have something you want to say? Or no?
I think Ethan brought it up, and it helped me understand, because your psychological part of your book, which I find is a part not just in tarot. I think it's something we don't talk enough, those of us who practice the occult and apply it enough when we do our practices. And I'm not sure if you just stick to the tarot or do you use other systems, and is your approach with psychology in tarot, how can I say, could it work in other workings that people may do?
Mm-hmm. I think it's a really good question. I think it can. Yeah. I mean, I think that, like the shadow work process that I offer with the tarot, I think that could apply to anything that you're working with shadow. And I think that, even if you're working in other systems like astrology or even working with the I Ching, because they have images that you can work with too. You can apply these same patterns of trying to work with the image, because that's what tarot cards are. They're images. They're scenes, they're figures, they're colors, they're symbols. And so any divination practice or any practice at all that works symbolically or with images, I think you can apply a lot of the stuff that I talk about in my book. And that's why Jungian psychology, I think, is so useful in particular. I don't really dabble in other forms of psychology just because I'm not a psychologist. I don't practice psychology. I'm not like a clinical psychologist in any fashion. But I have this knowledge of how Jungian psychology works almost as a philosophy. And so I really kind of stick to that because it's so much about the archetypal, which is these inner images that we carry with us all the time. So I think that can apply to so much. Absolutely. Yeah.
Now I know you also, this is getting off the tarot. Did anybody else have anything about the tarot? I did want to ask something else.
I don't think so.
Okay, just making sure. I know from I think from looking at your stuff, is there like what's up with, I guess, you and Persephone? Is that like a devotee type thing, or? Yeah.
My sister's name is Persephone.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. I love this question because everyone's like, oh, it's not as interesting as I thought it was.
It's anticlimactic.
She was always much cooler than I was. More people knew who she was when I was a kid. And so everyone was always like, oh, Persephone's sister's here. And no one knew my name. They just knew me as Persephone's sister. And then when I was kind of in the phase of like, oh, do I want to have a name for this thing I'm creating? And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, Persephone is also the goddess of duality in a lot of ways. And I really like that symbol in the tarot. I think so much of the tarot is about holding the tension of the opposites, which is what Jung says a lot about, interchange is always about holding the tension of the opposites. There's this and there's that, and there's tension between them. And if we hold it correctly, there'll be a synthesis or there'll be a breakthrough of some kind. And so Persephone is both the goddess of the underworld and darkness and spring and new life. And so she beautifully holds that tension of the opposites. So I like that about it too. And also it was just what I'm used to. I'm used to being in life.
Oh, that's funny. There was somebody who wanted to come on the show, but they're they're huge into Persephone. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, I don't want her to feel like I'm kind of ripping a style.
No.
He totally could have came on.
I'm not a devotee.
Yeah, I just texted him that. I was like, yo, that was his sister's name. You could have come on the show.
Yeah.
That's so bad. I feel bad. She's a cool chick too. She really would have dug it. Nice. All right. No, because I was going to ask you, like, if you were a Persephone devotee, like, could you give some examples? But it doesn't apply. All right. I just assumed. My bad.
I know, it's so funny. The amount of times I've gotten this question, I give the answer, and people like look so like disappointed because they want me to say something cool. And I'm like, that's just who I am. I've always been known as Persephone's sister, and my mom liked it a lot when I was like, I think I'm going to call it. She was like, I love that. That's fantastic. So I was like, oh, I'll make her happy. We'll go with that.
Besides that Carl Jung book, what would be like your another book besides that? One book that really shaped your approach?
It's a good question. I think, there were a lot of books I read early on in the Jungian sphere that were really helpful in understanding, like Marie Louise von Franz's On Divination and Synchronicity, which I mentioned earlier, like reading that and understanding divination more deeply. One of the things she says about it is that when we think about it psychologically, what we're doing is tapping into the dynamic load of a constellated archetype, which means that like we have these archetypes in us all the time. And sometimes they have, there's more energy in it because this is what's active in our life. And so divination taps into the electricity that's flowing through that archetype in our psyche and like plugs us into this field. And just these kinds of ways of thinking about it were like, just kind of blew my mind. And I was like, oh, this works. This is a thing that works. I also really appreciated Robert Johnson's work, which I think is a very approachable way to get into Jungian psychology and how we work with it personally, not like as like this bigger psychology. So he has a book called Inner Work, which is very readable. And he also has one called, I think it's Owning Your Shadow, which is they're just so quick and good. And like you get a lot out of it without it getting too dense. So those are some things that were very, foundational for me in the beginning. And then like in terms of tarot, the work of Mary K. Greer, she's like one of the OG tarot minds, and also Rachel Pollack were really big for me. And I think for probably most people who start with tarot, because they really were the first to kind of say, there's so many layers, let's find all the layers in this like modern way. So yeah.
Thank you. I don't think I've heard of any of those people actually. Well, no, I heard of one of the women. Thanks. Did you have any? Did you guys have any other questions or anything you wanted to add?
Have any?
Oh, okay. Was there anything else you would like to maybe add or mention maybe about the book that you want people to hear or know about?
Yeah, I think that the thing that makes it useful for people, I think, which is what my like goal with it, is to like kind of like one of the things that I talk about very early in the book is that we need to use it the way that the monks, in the Middle Ages would talk about the contemplative path, right? This path of contemplation that we're on, of meditation and presence. I'm actually right now reading St. John of the Cross, reading The Dark Night of the Soul.
Oh, like, nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So this idea of this contemplative path, being in this state of mindfulness and meditation. I'm not a Buddhist and I don't go that way too much, just is not my wheelhouse. But I like this kind of mystical side of it, that the Christian world kind of talked about it in the Middle Ages, and that's the world that the tarot was born out of. And so I think like there's this way of approaching it that it can be this friend to you and this guidepost to you as you're moving through your life in this contemplative way. And so I talk about that a lot in the book, and like how to be with the cards, how the cards can be with you. And so it's not just like, oh, I don't know what to do here, pull cards, but it's this companion. And so that's what I think is really unique about it and special about it. And what I really wanted to pull out is it's not just like, okay, you pulled the Four of Cups. What in the world does that mean? There's something that's to contemplate, to meditate on, to delve into. So that's the hope of what it guides like readers through. Tried really hard to make it to make it grounding.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming on. That was a great talk. I really, really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it. Hell yeah. Before we wrap it up, Judith, you want to let everybody know where they can find all your stuff again?
Yes, first, Marina, thank you so much. I actually appreciated this. I see it's a wonderful, how can I say, contribution within not just tarot, but the occult. So I look forward to, when is the book coming out again? Or is it
March
out already?
2nd. It's officially out March 2nd. It's available for pre-order and stuff now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I look forward to reading that. Thank you so much. And you could catch me on The Loon on YouTube as well as on Twitter as The Loon.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming on, Judith. And Ethan Indigo, my man.
Well, thank you so much, you guys. Mariana, that was awesome. Thank you for your insights. And that's a whole layer of inspiration within the cards, I feel like, that you revealed today. So thank you. Ethan Indigo Smith, easy to find online, and I appreciate anyone reaching out with communication. So feel free to say hi. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, sir. And Mariana, please let everybody know where they can find your podcast and your website and everything else.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Substack, YouTube as Persephone's Sister. And my website is also persephonessister.com. And the podcast is Soar Mystica. So there's lots of really juicy episodes and more to come in the coming months. Yeah, and then the book is available wherever you pre-order your books or get your books. I'm pretty sure it's just like generally out there now, so you can take a look.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much again for coming on. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and hopefully maybe get you back on in the future for something else.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. I really, really had a great time, so I really appreciate you having me on.
Great. I'm glad. And yeah, I guess that is the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.